Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
All right. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman live on your radio. Hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use, no doubt, starts now. This, my fellow Americans, is the broadcast for May 19th in the year of our Lord 2025. This is hour one of two. The goal always to protect life, liberty, and property, to promote God, family, and country, and to do so on your radio in the traditions of our founding fathers. Yes, indeed, we use the blueprint for liberty, including all the checks and balances, the supreme law of the land, for our protection from not only enemies, foreign and domestic, but even government enemies that seem to want to take the law into their own hands, manipulate the truth for their own personal, financial, and power-hungry gains. Welcome to the broadcast. Hope you had an absolutely delightful weekend. I know I did. Dr. Scott Bradley's with me. He's the author of the book and collegiate series To Preserve the Nation. He's also the man that does the weekly webinars every Thursday evening, Q&As on the Constitution and more. To learn, to get involved, to take part, to participate, please consider freedomsrisingsun.com. That's freedomsrisingsun.com. If you want to check out the weekly webinars, etc., look for Freedom's Call. Is that what it is, Dr. Bradley, Freedom's Call?
Well, if you go to BitChute or to Rumble, we have a channel on each one of those. BitChute channel is Freedom's Call, and you'll have access. If you get to bitchute.com and then you type in Freedom's Call, there's probably 600 or 700 videos there that we've done. Current event stuff, so get in the stuff that's most recent if that's what you're interested in. And on Rumble, it's Freedom's Call 1787. So there's channels underneath those services that are offered. So
look for that. You'll find them, and hey, hopefully you can get tapped in and good things can happen. Dr. Bradley, did you have a good weekend?
You know, I got to think back hard. No, yeah, we had a great weekend.
God, family, country style weekend?
Yeah, you bet. And it's just gorgeous here. I mean, even though it's been in the 30s, you know, in terms of temperature-wise, everything looks so lush and green because of the, you know, rain we've been getting and everything like that. It's spring, and you got to, you know, consider, you know, in the high mountain valleys, the temperature sometimes goes down a little bit. We had a freeze warning yesterday, for crying out loud. So it gets fresh, but it's still gorgeous. I mean, to me, it looks, you know, Garden of Eden-ish, you know.
Yeah, we always welcome the wet springs as well, because it just means that, hey, the snow in the mountains melts a little slower that way. It doesn't just come down and flood everything, but yet you get a little bit more water that way. I mean, it's pretty much the best of all worlds right now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going great. If, you know, I think if it stayed this way for a few more months, I'd be happy. I think the dog days of summer really kind of become a little bit almost oppressive to me because it is, I mean, when it gets so blasted hot, you know, and you're just kind of cooking whenever you're out and about. We like to take a hike every day, and it's kind of nice to get out early enough. When we're on the radio in the morning, it's kind of hard to get out when the air's still all fresh and not all breathed over, you know.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Climate change. There's books coming out. There's evidence coming out that they're just filling us full of propaganda on that topic. It's a story for another day, but we just wanted you to be aware of that. Today I want to talk about this critical issue. There's several issues that are important to discuss today, but this first one from our buddies Matt Staver over at Liberty Counsel, lc.org. Drag queens in Christian schools, ? You ask? Yes, that's kind of the problem. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals is now reviewing our case. Zinski v. Liberty University is kind of the deal. They say this case will decide whether Christian schools and universities can be forced to hire drag queens and transvestites. That's kind of the deal. It's a weird, you know, deal. It's in the 4th District Circuit Court of Appeals. At its core, this case is an insidious attempt to destroy Christian doctrine with gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender ideology. So, hey, you know what? If somebody intentionally lives in conflict with a biblical doctrine supported by an organization, do you have to hire them? Are you going to be forced to employ these people? The implications of this case are absolutely huge, because the question is, hey, with that going on, can the Christian organization actually carry out its Christian mission? Do you want your church or school to be forced to hire drag queens or gender benders whose actions and whose appearance conflict with biblical Christian doctrine? If your answer is no, then he says, I ask you to humbly help finance this case. Now, they say, here's what's interesting, and I'm not too interested in the finances of this, although I will say that I believe Matt Staver and crew are good, honest people and will spend your money wisely. I've watched them for decades, and they do a lot of good stuff. But they say this case was a setup from the beginning. Jonathan Zinski, I guess this guy's been taking female hormones for 4 months before he even applied for a job and signed and agreed to abide by Liberty University's doctrinal statement. Now, that's pretty telling, in my opinion, about it being a setup. I think they are right. In a response, rejecting Liberty Counsel's motion to dismiss, the lower court's judge basically ruled that, hey, you cannot direct a shield against these anti-discrimination laws. And they say, hey, that makes no sense. It violates Liberty University's, First Amendment freedom rights. If the court's ruling held true, it would mean that religious organizations could be forced to hire people that absolutely stand against everything that the university or the Christians stand for. The lower court ruling, though, Matt Staver says, chief attorney over at Liberty Counsel, says, hey, this sets the stage for this to go in our favor. It'll probably go to the Supreme Court. The First Amendment requires that religious institutions must have the right to hire people who live a life guided by the doctrine of the organization. We need your help to stop them from this. Support our legal fund today. The Judge Moon in this case, further concluded that Liberty University's employment of this Zinski guy does not really control its ability to believe or to think or to act the way it wants, but that's not true either. Anyway, they say this Zinski guy was hired for a role in information and technology, which means day to day this person has access to students and staff members alike. And what message does it send to all these people? Anyway, basically, this goes far beyond the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender sideshow he is desperately trying to pull off because, hey, what should happen here? Do people have the right to hire who they want to? Anyway, it's a big, huge battle going on. Where this is going to go, I don't know. Now, they say, thankfully, we have a special challenge grant that'll, help with a bunch of money. I don't mean to discount the money side of this discussion. I know this is a lot of way you could say, well, hey, this is a press release to raise money. I believe that's true. I also believe this is a pivotal case, though, and the question becomes, will Liberty Counsel get shut down or what really will happen in this case? It's a big deal, folks, because I think that it'll completely set the direction and violate religious freedom if we're not very careful. Liberty Counsel has been in this business for a long time and has a pretty good, successful track record, even before the Supreme Court battling this stuff. So time only tells where it's going to end up, Dr. Bradley.
Well, let me just say up front, I think logic, reason, and intelligence will ultimately prevail, and this thing will be deep-sixed. It'll be tossed overboard. I think that the effort to do this...
When you say deep-sixed and tossed overboard, you mean Liberty Counsel will win?
I believe that. I believe that right now the pendulum has swung, I believe, in society against the perversions of the people that are doing this. But I've got to say, there's a lot of undertow on this thing, and the cultural shenanigans of stuff that goes on in universities. I mean, you look at everything from the elementary, kindergarten, even from that forward. We are having a cultural war that's happening, and I say, get your children out of those cesspools and quit getting them indoctrinated. But so there is an undertow. There's no question about that. But I do believe that in this particular time we're going to have that prevail. So that, you can't lose hope and everything. But let me just kind of step back a little bit from this. Everybody should have the right to hire whomever they please. And legislative action, for example, let's just take back in, remember, 2015, they got that Supreme Court ruling that, you have to support same-sex marriage. Okay. Well, in that really heady kind of day, Utah legislature went out and put out a bill they called the Religious Liberties Anti-Discrimination Act, which was absolutely, unequivocally the antithesis of that.
Yeah, go ahead and skip the break.
Basically, that act by the Utah legislature in the giddy way of the same-sex Supreme Court ruling in 2015. Remember those days. Remember who's, the administrations and all those kind of nonsensical things that were going on. So Utah clambered on board that train wreck and basically said they will, if you're a church, now a church is not a university, and a university is not a church. So that would not protect this university.
Although the liberals would disagree. They believe the universities are their church for their godless agenda, but I know what you're saying.
Okay, so Utah State University, university and everybody else in Utah, because of this legislature, every business in Utah because of this legislative action, every individual that rents more than 2 apartments, everybody had to kowtow, had to bow down to the gender bender stuff, okay? Hiring, renting, all that kind of stuff. There were only 2 protected classes that didn't have to do that. It was churches and the Boy Scouts, okay? Utah's so flaked out on this thing, it can't even be imagined what they were doing. So what they did is they basically said, you have to basically bend to the latest perversion, okay? Well, so legislature's helping this happen. The Supreme Court helped it happen that same year. In 2016, Obama's Civil Rights Commission in September published a 296-page document that says basically religious liberties need to be so narrowly defined as to not in any way impinge upon all these other declared new rights, okay, that others have to fulfill. So we were, and sadly we continue to be in many ways on this bad trajectory. And so what's happening is they're saying, oh, well, churches don't have to hire, but everybody else does. Well, it's an absolute facade. Everybody has the right of association. Everybody can say, and it doesn't matter how big your business is or how little your business is or how narrow-minded you are or how bigoted, whatever it is, you can choose to associate with whom you choose. And your business should never, ever, at any time, be impinged upon by these kind of absolute requirements. Well, so during that era, the 2015, 2016 timeframe, there was a real juggernaut that was going through the whole society. I think that's changed to a bit. The pendulum swung the other way, and we're seeing all these, Title IX things and all that kind of stuff that's happening. There's only 2 genders. The military transgender thing's been rescinded, and the idea that
this is where Trump has done a lot of good. He really has.
It is.
And when I say Trump, I mean Trump and his administration. There's a lot of other people that have been helping and participating. And I agree the pendulum swung, and I pray that Liberty Counsel can raise the money they need. I don't think they will play games with their money. I think they're serious and true. Almost 3 decades ago when I learned about Liberty Counsel, Matt Staver, I had him on the radio with us several times. And I learned, they're as true blue as you can get. Are they perfect? I'm sure they're not, but I think they're true to their cause. I think they're, they literally raise money, and they say that our donations are not our income for our basic expenses. We have a way to earn income for our basic expenses, and then, hey, your donations deal with these specific issues, so 100% of your money goes to these issues. That's fairly impressive. The other impressive thing, when I first started out with them, as I mentioned, years and years ago, covering their stories and what they do and all that kind of stuff, they had this deal where the ACLU said, we're going to sue you if you do this. And then the Liberty Counsel came back and said, well, hey, we'll defend you if you do this, but if you don't, we'll sue you. And so it was an interesting upending of the ACLU. Well, here's the summation of this whole point that I'm making. They say this: in our 36 years, Liberty Counsel has won 37 cases that we've argued in our briefs before the U.S. Supreme Court, and countless other cases between state and federal courts. So they're pretty big. They made a lot of difference, and they've really helped set the stage to protect we the people. It's kind of interesting, Dr. Bradley, the work that they've done. I don't think many people want, Americans to realize that this is happening, but LC, or Liberty Counsel, has done a great job for a long time. And I suspect the pendulum swung, as you say, and I think they'll win this case. And I think it's a landmark, important case to win and stop them in their tracks. Because otherwise, not only will you be forced where you can live and who you can live with and who you can rent to and all that kind of stuff, but then eventually who you can even hire. You have people that will be hired that are undermining everything we do. So they say we fully expect this case to progress to the U.S. Supreme Court. And then they say this Zinski guy is represented by the ACLU. These people have millions and millions of dollars. So they say, hey, we need your support or whatever. Anyway, any other coverage on this? I think it's a pretty interesting case, and I think we need to watch it as it goes through. The Liberty Counsel is the only one that has the guts and the wherewithal basically to sue the Southern Poverty Law Center as well. And they're dragging, the Southern Poverty Law Center has tried to drag the Liberty Counsel through the courts and everything else. But the Liberty Counsel is getting the upper hand even on the ACLU. And they have literally $800 million in offshore accounts to fund their legal battles. So some of these battles are critical, Doctor.
Well, they are, and I take my hat off to people that are willing to do this, and we all should be recognizing the foolishness of what's going on in our legislatures, too. I mean, just like this Utah thing, holy cow. And when I went to testify that a number of times down at the Utah legislature, I found myself opposing it from other churches because they knew their butts were covered by the way the law was written. Hey, we're exempt from this, but we're going to force all you other guys to do it. No, this is an individual. Thomas Jefferson considered himself a religious sect of one. Now, I've examined his religious beliefs. I believe there's a bigger spectrum than one that believes the way he did. But the fact of the matter is he had the right to believe as he did as an individual. And I think that that's the Americanist philosophy. By the way, back in 2020, Matt's group represented a Tampa, Florida pastor that was holding church when the county had mandated churches close. Well, the charges were dropped. I mean, this Bravo Sierra that went on, 5 years ago, Sam, if it was 6 years ago, I'd think, oh, this will never happen. But look at what happened during that COVID con thing that happened to America and to the world. And Matt's group went in and defended this pastor for holding church, in spite of the fact that they mandate it. You can't have religious liberty. Yeah, we can have, strip joints and all sorts of other things that are probably, you think about how unsavory some of these things are. But the fact of the matter is he defended this guy for holding church services, and they dropped the charges ultimately. So good on them for doing that kind of stuff. They take on some of these things that society would say, oh, how could you do that? We're being good global citizens, or whatever Bravo Syria they're coming up with. But it was all a con. It was a con.
There's no question. So there's few organizations that I support, and I've been at this for 30 years or so, and Dr. Bradley's been at it longer than I have. There's few organizations that I can endorse or that I can back and support, and one of them is the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. As you know, I'm well involved with that, cspoa.org. I'm well involved in and supporting Liberty Counsel as well. There's just not that many organizations. John Birch Society, I completely support. I think there's a few organizations that, they're not perfect. I get that they've made mistakes but they've pretty much maintained their cause, and they pretty much haven't caved, they're not perfect. Some of these things, you can find something where they've done something not great or they've made a mistake. Even Ron Paul, down at the end, we felt like he was like the greatest congressman in modern times. Even he got caught kind of capitulating and partnering with kind of the enemy. And saying I'll go along with this if you do that and everything else. And, that's really typical in politics. When is it a cave versus when is it they were doing their best and they either got snookered or misjudged something, or, we got to give people a little bit of grace. But at the same time, there's very few organizations that we can really support. And Liberty Counsel to me seems to be one of them. The National Vaccine Information Center, Barbara Lowe Fisher, is another one. Another one is John Birch Society, as I mentioned. And then there's a lot of news organizations that I watch that keep track of this stuff too. So anyway, I just wanted to give a highlight to some people that I believe. Oftentimes you don't hear enough about Liberty Counsel. They're behind the scenes battling in the trenches, and it's really hard to see what's going on. Sometimes they even win a lot of these cases, and we don't even understand what happened or the threat that was before us, but it's been averted because of these people's efforts. I support another one, for example. I support the Gun Owners of America group. There's very few groups, but they do exist, Doctor, and we got to celebrate them and support their work when we can.
Oh, absolutely. And maybe, I know we got a break sneaking up on us, but, maybe I could even talk about it for just a minute here. I mean, because I brought it up. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that, but this happened. Okay. All right. We're in the 50th year since the fall of Saigon. Okay. Happened April 30th, 1975. Okay, so here we are 50 years later. Well, I talked about the indoctrination processes through our public education system. And we're doing it to ourselves, folks. I mean, we have met the enemy and it is us, that pogo statement from, the political cartoon. And basically, here's the deal. Saigon fell. Now, okay, I'll just give you a little personal example. Good friend of mine, a Vietnamese fellow that had helped with the American forces in Southeast Asia, he and his family, him and his wife and his two little girls, were able to escape Saigon as it fell. Okay, he left behind a family that had been, on the American side, if you will. I mean, we're talking his extended family. Anyway, his extended family all ended up in re-education camps, where they had to reset the wrong thinking that they had, okay? And this guy that was a friend of mine, his little brother had been killed during the Tet Offensive in '68, okay? He was an Army officer in Southeast, in the South Vietnamese Army. Okay, anyway, he had been killed during Tet, and the rest of his family ended up in education camps. I'm going with this so there's a point, okay? They ended up having to reset this. And of course, when they'd write to this friend of mine that had escaped, they basically everything was redacted. And finally, he got a letter that said, oh, so-and-so, the brother, is so fortunate. It's so wonderful he's in the position he's in. And the North Vietnamese communist censors said, oh, here's some good news coming out of this. We had to let this go through. They did not redact it. So anyway, this sister that wrote to him basically was saying our brother is more fortunate than we are for being dead. Okay? So here's what we're doing in America. We are not sending people to re-education camps from a conquering force. We are allowing our nation to be re-educated in philosophies that are destructive to everything we hold dear, and we're doing it taxpayer expense. It's a religious effort, a faith-based kind of belief system that has no God, this secular humanism stuff, and we are educating the children in this gender bender stuff, in false government philosophies. I mean, these kinds of things, if it happens, we lose our nation because we let our kids learn this and then vote those kind of things into power. It's a tragic travesty.
We've even taught our children, even if you disagree with it, you still need to go along with it because that's the only kind, in thing to do, And we've deceived ourselves into believing
we're good global citizens if we do it.
You'll be a good global citizen. The only way that you can, survive this is to embrace this. That's the lie. See, I can stand against it 100%, but I can still be a kind, good follower of Christ, even though I stand up for my core, fundamental moral values, right? And so we've been deceived. Well, there's some good news on the horizon. We'll talk about it coming up. I'm Sam Bushman. Dr. Scott Bradley with me. freedomsrisingsun.com on your radio.
Exposing corruption. Informing citizens. pursuing liberty. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
News this hour from townhall.com. I'm Rich Shammason. It is not a done deal just yet, but President Trump's big, beautiful bill has advanced in the House, voting 17-16. The House Budget Committee last night cleared the way for the GOP budget bill to move ahead. 4 Republican skeptics voted present, allowing the measure to proceed.
At its core, the package permanently extends the existing income tax cuts that were approved during President Trump's first term in 2017. That means without action, taxes will go up. The measure also adds temporary new tax cuts that the president campaigned on in 2024, including no taxes on tips, overtime pay, and auto loan interest payments.
Correspondent Ken Lorman says now come talks aimed at crafting a bill that could win approval by the original Memorial Day deadline. President Trump and Russia's Vladimir Putin scheduled to talk by phone this morning. And following that call, Mr. Trump will be speaking with Ukrainian President Zelensky as Russia's war in Ukraine rages on. Cancer touches us all. The words of former President Biden. He's facing a serious health challenge.
Biden's office says he was diagnosed with prostate cancer on Friday, with the cancer cells having spread to the bone. A statement said, while this represents a more aggressive form of the disease, the cancer appears to be hormone sensitive, which allows for effective management. The 82-year-old Biden and his family are reviewing treatment options with his physicians. Greg Clugston, the White House.
New Jersey transit trains return to service first thing tomorrow. The agency has a tentative deal to end a 3-day strike by engineers. A pay dispute idled service for some 100,000 daily riders. On Wall Street, the Dow is down 225 points, and NASDAQ off 263. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Mike Gallagher here, host of The Mike Gallagher Show. If you know me, you know I only put my name behind people and companies I trust. When it comes to mortgages, I trust Mike and Brian at Fellowship Home Loans. They're not just friends. They've done loans for me, my family. I've seen firsthand how they treat every client like their family. And these days, that personal touch really matters. With the cost of everything up, you might be looking for ways to free up cash. Maybe you're thinking about a cash-out refi or HELOC to finish some home projects, consolidate debt, or just get ahead financially. Fellowship is a full-service direct lender, not a broker. They cut out the middleman. That means faster decisions, fewer fees, and less stress. Whether you're buying your first home, downsizing, or refinancing to get some breathing room, they'll tailor fit the loan to your life. Get started at fellowshiphomeloans.com/Mike G. fellowshiphomeloans.com/Mike G, or call 800-510-MIKE, 800-510-6453. Fellowship Home Loans, mortgage lending by the book.
Nationwide Mortgage Bankers, DBA Fellowship Home Loans, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 819382.
Have you ever had great honey? No, I mean really good, all-natural, raw honey? Well, now you can, thanks to localhoneyman.com. We can ship out our locally made honey all across the U.S. So don't worry, you won't miss out. Plus, Local Honeyman has so many different flavors, like Utah Wildflower, High Desert Delight, Happy Valley, and Blackberry, just to name a few. So purchase your delicious raw honey today at localhoneyman.com.
Do you treasure your liberty? Well, at lovingliberty.net, we most certainly do. And we want to help protect your liberty too. Become part of the family. Everyone knows that the core of any society is the family. Therefore, the government should foster and protect the integrity of its family, we the people. Won't you join us as a Loving Liberty sponsor to help us promote the principles in the 5,000-year leap? Let's restore the miracle that changed the world at lovingliberty.net.
I really don't want to talk about this, but I will. I'm just so mad. I didn't get asked to the junior prom and it's raining, which means by the time I get to school, I'm soaking wet. Dad picked me up just after I left and I was so mad I got out and he said, wait, your mom said to give you this. I forgot my lunch money and then I dropped it in the water and I was late for history, and so at lunchtime I had to find something on John Stuart Mill, which of course our library didn't have. So I had to walk all the way down to the office to call my mom, and she found something on the internet and called me back. And Karen, she wouldn't even help me, and that's a whole nother story. But Dad helped me conjugate nouns or whatever on the way to the swim team workout, and then he read my history paper while I was in the pool, and of course I forgot the bibliography, so I had to do that with my mother when I got home, and it made me totally forget that I put my jeans in the washer that morning, and I hate it when they sit wet like that all day and smell like mildew, but my mom said she put them in the dryer while I was at the swim team, and I'm just not going to go to the prom, no matter who asks me. I just want to stay home with my mom and dad.
Family.
And just hang out.
Isn't it about time?
Unless Dustin asked me.
From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Scott Bradley and myself discussing this critical case. Drag queens in Christian schools. Matt Staver, Liberty Counsel, doing a great job saying, hey, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals is now reviewing our case. We look forward to the next phase of this litigation. We will not allow the ACLU to steamroll this Christian school or any other. In our 36 years, Liberty Counsel says, we have won 37 cases they argue before the Supreme Court and countless other cases before state and federal courts. They say we fully expect this case to progress to the U.S. Supreme Court. And Zinski is represented by the ACLU, and there are hundreds of millions of dollars of endowment money to take us on, but they believe they can win. And I support Liberty Counsel. I believe they can win. I agree with Dr. Bradley. They've swung the pendulum in our favor, and let's, go for broke and take advantage of it, Doctor.
Well, absolutely. I mentioned a kind of a little, tidbit, and we don't need to beat this horse to death, I guess, maybe, but I will just spend a moment longer.
Well, you mentioned with the Saigon example where we're headed if we're not very careful.
That's right, the re-education camps, and that's kind of where I wanted to go with this thing for a second. I mean, this cultural drift that we have been in, and that doesn't mean it's not going to return, that ultimately becomes law, is basically what we found historically. And so we see the education of the youth ultimately ends up being what our nation adopts. And so the irreligiosity, meaning this diminishment in our religious belief system, I think is very much attributable to a lot of things, the media and to the politics and to certainly the education system. But just a little personal example of, I said, get your kids out of those indoctrination centers. Stop. Break this in your own cycle, in your own family. And I've historically always, I've had a gym in my basement. I work out in the mornings and so on and so forth. But one morning I came up from my workout and came up to the main floor, and my wife and our third grade daughter were sitting in the kitchen, and she was reviewing Darwin's evolutionary theory with my daughter, third grader. Can you imagine? This godless philosophy that, has permeated society so much. Anyway, I says, Tamara, what are you doing? And she says, I'm priming my daughter to be able to pass the test she has today at school. It was kind of through gritted teeth, But that's what happens.
Yeah, it's time to go ahead and throw that hat in the ring and walk off center stage.
That's the problem. Is
That's what I'm saying.
Your kid retains some of that. Whether mom's sitting there talking to her at the kitchen table, grilling her on the things she's going to have to do in her test, on her schooling. And so, you can say, you can toss this as soon as you finish the test, whatever. It doesn't matter. But there's a retention level. And if you do that for a dozen years before you send them off to the high priests of humanism in the university to thoroughly indoctrinate them, ultimately and finally, this cultural drift that has been happening. I mean, I think about when I was a kid, we got a thing called Weekly Reader. It was a little magazine. It only cost, and it was a pittance to be able to buy the thing, but you had to buy it. Your parents had to sign up and pay for it to get it. And it was one of those things every week the kids got this little throwaway rag that they all reviewed together in class. And if your mom and dad hadn't bought it, you were the odd man out and you had to sit there and read your library book or something while they discussed. At any rate, it was a propaganda rag for the United Nations and the humanist philosophy that was being promulgated. And even, this is like I say, when I was a kid growing up, this is the way it was. They did this stuff constantly. It is unremitting, and I believe that we have a responsibility as parents before God, because we've been entrusted with these precious children that were sent into our home to raise in righteousness, teach them correct principles. And it's not just your religious belief system. I mean, the religion of liberty and proper government, I believe, is every bit as important, because if we lose that, as we're just talking about, pretty soon the irreligious become it becomes the crowd that ran through the streets with bloody heads in the French Revolution, and religion became completely, atheism became the religion of France. Marriage was considered to be slavery. I mean, everything went to the dogs because the wrong people got in charge. And that's the trajectory we tend to be on if we let this faith-based philosophy of secular humanism, it's a religion without God, become our civil religion in the nation. And that's where we're going, my friend. And
yes, I think the Liberty Counsel summed up your point well with this statement. We will not let the ACLU steamroll this Christian school or any others, because if the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender agenda wins, no Christian institution will be safe. If we lose, Christian universities and churches will be forced to hire drag queens and be forced to promote the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender agenda. I think they've got that right, Doctor, and I think that's really where kind of the rubber meets the road. It's time for people to stand up and say, we're not doing this. We're not letting this happen on our watch. All right, we've got some sad news, ladies and gentlemen. And it's good news and sad news at the same time, and I bring this up for a variety of reasons. Headline says Joe Biden was diagnosed on Friday with an aggressive form of prostate cancer that is metastasized to the bone. That's according to a Sunday release from Biden's office. Trump then posted to Truth Social on Sunday evening in response to the news, Melania and I are saddened to hear about Joe Biden's recent medical diagnosis, Trump says, but we extend our warmest and best wishes to Joe and Jill, and we pray a fast, successful recovery. Now, I think that's. I'm sad that this has happened to Joe. I never take delight in somebody else's suffering, but there's several aspects to this that I think are worthy of discussion. Number one, I think Donald Trump appropriately responded to this. I too say I'm so sorry for Joe Biden to have to go through this experience. Our prayers are that suffering is minimal and that he has a speedy recovery as well. The next interesting twist to this is CNN pundits, Paul DeGala, I think is how you say it, and Van Jones each applauded President Donald Trump for issuing a considerate statement about Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis. So that's good news in my mind that, hey, even CNN saying good for Donald Trump. I don't want this to be a love fest about this. What I do want to focus on, though, is this clarion call for civility idea that I have. If Joe has cancer and it's horrible and his family's suffering, and we reach out and say, hey, we pray for kindness and we pray for, less pain and we pray for the medical professionals that take care of him and that he has a speedy recovery. And I think that's a good thing. And I just want to shout out to CNN and Van Jones and those guys and Donald Trump and everybody else. Hey, it's a great time to kind of step back and look at life. And, for Joe, my prayers are that Joe takes a step back and realizes the errors of his ways and turns to God Almighty. And so I bring this up. It's a really clarion call for civility on one hand. On the other hand, this just proves beyond the shadow of a doubt that the Democrats flat out covered up Joe Biden's health issues and lied to us, though. So there's two statements. One, let's be kind to Joe and let's, put our best foot forward and be civil about this. But let's also not lose sight of the fact that, hey, there's no way this happened with the amount of doctors and supervision and health checks they give the president and the best health care in the world for the commander in chief and anything else. It's impossible that they didn't know this. They covered it up and now they're admitting to it. But we should have known this, and they did know this. They had to have a long time before this to get to this point, Doctor. Either you've got the worst medical professionals who didn't do their job and they didn't know, or they lied and covered it up, which is the latter is the most likely reality. So 2 issues, 2 topics, same story, Doctor.
Well, you bring up some very good points, and I would probably add another little different spin to this thing. Maybe not different, and I don't want to detract from it, but you may be aware that there's a growing effort to seek out information about the auto pen scandal and the
no, this is totally on topic. This is the quintessential point here, people.
Well, it is, I believe, because I mean, I don't know if you've heard. What's his name? Robert Hur was the guy that interviewed Joe Biden about the.
Go ahead and skip the break. Continue, Doctor. Yes, sir. That's exactly right.
About his keeping of classified information and that whole nonsense that's going on there, and why he said he's a doddering old man, that we'd really have a hard time, convicting him. Everybody'd have sympathy. He was the president of the United States at the time. If you haven't listened to that interview, you need to go do it. I mean, he couldn't find his way to the bathroom on his own, I don't believe. So, I mean, there's so many things that have been going on, and, prostate cancer is what he's got. My belief probably is that he had plenty of those exams during his presidency. Prostate cancer is a very slow-moving cancer, and honestly, if it wasn't diagnosed previously, I would be absolutely shocked. But the fact of the matter is, where I'm going with this rant is, I believe that they're putting together another sympathy call.
Yes, they are.
Because there are people saying, "Oh my goodness, this auto pen Bravo Sierra that went on, and all of these pardons that were given, which really ought to be called completely into question." I'm being kind by using that terminology. But it's another effort to say, "Oh, come on, leave the old guy alone." I mean,
nope.
Can't you see?
And that's why I bring up these 2 aspects to the story. To one, say this: it's appropriate to be civil to him personally and to his family, and say, "Hey, you know what? Our prayers are with you. We know this is horrible and hard, and we pray for those who will be caring for you, and we pray for a speedy recovery." And on a personal level, we don't need to make it personal and hate on Joe. It's time to give him, some dignity and respect in our responses to his illness. At the same time, and this is where the propaganda enters, just because I want to be kind to Joe and his family on a personal note, and I want to be civil about this, that doesn't mean that I have to cave on the criminal activity that's taken place under this guise of his health problems. Now, it's not a guise that he's had the health problems. The deception here is we're going to leave him in place. We're going to all use the auto pen and use the, I don't know what you call it, people working for Joe to take action on his behalf that they don't have authority to take. In other words, all kind of criminal activity. And hey, the cover-up is he's fine. Then the cover-up is, oh my gosh, the poor guy's got health problems. You can't blame anybody. Let us off the hook for this. No, I can be civil to Joe and his family, but I can absolutely quadruple down and say this criminal activity will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and people need to be savvy enough to see both sides of that truth.
Well, I absolutely believe that this is a deflection. This is a distraction. This is, a gimme. Come on, guys. Let the guy die in peace. I mean, kind of thing. I mean, it's
no,
just
prosecute all the criminals that took advantage of his ill health and mocked him and cheated and deceived and played games under that lie or under that manipulation and deception. Whether it's the poor guy's unhealthy, give him a pass, or the guy's fine, give him a pass. All those lies. But let's prosecute everybody else. Anybody who enabled the auto pen. Auto pen's a kind of a false notion. It isn't really an auto pen at all. It's somebody else wields it on his behalf. You can say, Sam at Auto signs. I don't care. At the end of the day, somebody directs something to happen. Okay, you can't blame it on AI or an auto pen. It's not where you can separate humans from it. Humans committed criminal activity, and they did it by saying Joe's fine. Don't worry, it's Joe. And then now they're doing it by saying Joe's got a health problem. I'm going to be civil about his health problems, but I'm going to be very hardcore and candid about, hey, if there was illegal activity taking place, prosecute to the fullest extent of the law. Don't let these people off the hook over this. Don't do that. So that's the point where we bring stories to the table. We take you to the last mile of the story. Very few people do that, Doctor. But you got to separate out being kind to Joe and realizing that health problems are no fun for anybody. And we don't wish them on anybody. At the same time, we're not going to let criminal activity go, whether it's under this manipulation or lie or dishonesty or whatever else. We're not doing that. So I would encourage Kash Patel. I would encourage Pam Bondi and Donald Trump and anybody else in the administration. Absolutely go for broke and prosecute for criminal activity. Dig hard and find out, hey, they lied to us about saying he was fine. Now they might be lying to us about how bad his health is. Either way, set that aside and focus on the real criminal activity and clean house. That's what I would say, Doctor.
Yeah, there's no question that there were obfuscations. And again, I use a very euphemistic term. These things that happened, we literally didn't have a president of the United States for 4 years. I mean, this is a crime against the entire nation.
And those crimes need to be prosecuted.
The people that perpetrated
figuratively
this,
speaking, heads need to roll over this thing.
They do, but it goes way beyond some of these other things that, I mean, you look at this Comey thing with the 86-47 thing. I mean,
that's
on, people.
Evil as well. That's got to stop. I mean, those kind of things are just unacceptable.
All of these things.
Kash Patel's in the news, and I've been doing my best. I endorsed him, and I pray that he does right. But there's something that I'm kind of concerned about that Kash Patel's doing. A lot of people are going to applaud this, but I believe if they're not very careful, they'll be deceived. And this directly relates. Headline says, FBI Director Kash Patel says FBI leaving longtime headquarters. That's Fox Business with the details. Kash Patel announced plans to relocate 1,500 agents from the J. Edgar Hoover building, aiming to decentralize operations, and they say, create an enhanced FBI workforce across the country. On one hand, that sounds great. People are like, oh, yeah, shut that down. Here's the problem. We need to defund or decrease funding for the FBI. We need to realize it's a criminal enterprise. It's been for decades. It is unconstitutional. And so I don't want to just take 1,500 agents and put them in close proximity to the American people. Because remember, there's a separation between the states and the 10-mile square Washington, D.C. Okay? And so they want to basically turn the states into federal zones with this, if you're not very, very careful. And even if you say, well, no, Kash means well. He just doesn't want this big group in D.C. Fine. But do you want a bunch of these people pushed to your state, to your local municipality, armed to the teeth with law enforcement unchecked powers? See, we need to decrease the funding for the FBI and decrease the size and scope of the agency and return it to its core mission. And just because you push a bunch of agents into my state or around the country, that doesn't decrease their authority or their, criminal activity or whatever you want to call it. We need to be very careful that we're really decreasing money and decreasing personnel to the FBI. Anything but, in my opinion, a subterfuge. It's crazy and will be confusing. And you might say, well, Kash isn't going to do anything bad with these agents in the local areas. You might be right. You might be wrong. Who knows? But I'm telling you right now, what happens if it got in the hands of a Joe Biden who claims he claims he's the godlike figure and in charge of everything, lies for years, and then, hey, he's so incompetent you can't prosecute him. Don't worry, he's just an old dawdling man. You can't. Okay, under that guise, what would the next president, like a Joe Biden or a Barack Obama or a Bill Clinton what would they do with all these agents local to you? They will basically violate the state's authority. They will violate the checks and balances that separated the general government from the states. They will basically make the states subservient to the general government if we're not very, very careful. This has real potential to do some serious damage. The point is, I don't think they're going about it right, Doctor.
Well, your points are all well taken, and the fact of the matter is that what you set in place today can, if it's not based on foundational principles, can be abused later. And I'll give you a quick example. 1863, that Civil War era, remember that, guys. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. Okay, Congress was first Taney, the Supreme Court Chief Justice, says you can't do that. It's a legislative power. Congress delegated unconstitutionally the authority to the president. The president went on to suspend habeas corpus, another big in the long list of violations of Lincoln. Well, okay, so they did that. Well, in 1871, Grant, president then, suspended habeas corpus again. And today, even to this moment, the president claims the right to suspend habeas corpus. Okay?
And I reject that 100%.
Absolutely. Hey, but before we leave, I know we're almost out of time. I know you're going to want to have a good news. This is my opinion, a good news story. But you heard what the Hall of Fame did about the baseball players that have been banned from the Hall of Fame. You heard about that, I'm pretty sure. But if you didn't, here's the story. They said after a baseball player has died that had been banned from the Hall of Fame, that ends his banning. Okay, now there's a couple of people that I think really ought to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And one of them is Pete Rose, and the other one's Shoeless Joe Jackson. These are guys, there's redemption ultimately that comes to all of us. Hopefully we get, right with the Savior. And
there is if
we
accept it, but yes.
Okay, so anyway, now, because both Rose and, of course, Shoeless Joe Jackson died when I was young, I wasn't there when all of the scandal happened in the World Series. But the fact of the matter is, I think it's a really good thing. I think that's a really good thing that they did. Here's some individuals that unquestionably were stellar performers whose performance in many instances has never been eclipsed by some of the players. Or, it's just amazing to me. And you know what? If they goofed off or goofed up or whatever, and I don't believe that Shoeless Joe did, and I believe that what Rose did was the big problem he had was he betted that his team was going to win. He didn't say, I'm going to bet against them and I'll make them lose, whatever, But anyway, they got banned from sports, from the Hall of Fame. And, they've been in shame, and I know that it hung over their heads forever and ever. But they recently made the decision that these people, once they've passed away, this stigma can, be overlooked, if you will. I consider it kind of redemption. It's kind of like sooner or later we all get cleaned, okay? That's the hope for all of us. I know that we got lots of growth to do for all of ourselves, but sooner or later I think things can be made well again. I just kind of thought, we ought to celebrate that. The fact that some of these people that really gave so much to their career and to their, their whole industry, if you will, now can be recognized. I think that's kind of a cool thing. To me, that's a positive story.
Sorry,
Sam?
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. My mic was muted there for a second. I started talking. Pete Rose, Shoeless Joe Jackson, and others reinstated by the MLB now, right?
Yeah. Once you've died, they can say, these guys weren't such bad guys. Honestly, I think it should have happened a long time before. But this thing at death, it gives the Major League Baseball guys, it gives them kind of a little bit of cover to do what they should have done a long time ago. And
I wish they would have done some of that and believe in redemption when people are alive. It's good when they're dead, but I support it when people are alive too. And I really think a lot of times when people become felons for certain reasons, we've got to find a way for them to be able to overcome that status as well. Once they've paid their debt to society to become full-fledged citizens once again. Even Donald Trump is a felon and can't have a gun, right? This is insanity. Nothing he's done was violent. In fact, all there's been is committed violence against him. But yet, hey, he's a felon and can't have a gun. At some point, there's got to be a way to pay our debt to society. Along with that, justice is a healthy dose of mercy, sir.
Well, and that's the message the Savior brought. Justice will be done, but he certainly provided a way back for all of us. And I think a little bit more of that in society. We're talking a little bit about this with our civility thing that you brought up earlier, So, we can figure that out.
Weighty subjects, ladies and gentlemen, on your radio. That's what Dr. Scott Bradley and Sam Bushman are well known for. Dr. Bradley, thank you so much for your service, my friend. I know we'll have a little bit of time off because I'm out of town, you're out of town, a couple of things, but we'll get back together soon. And when we do, it'll be, of course, another rendition of hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use. Truth-telling talk radio, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We'll talk to y'all later. Have a great week,
Dr. Scott Bradley, his website, ladies and gentlemen, freedomsrisingsun.com. Check out his collegiate series to preserve the nation. Also, check out the weekly webinar. Sign up and get your free invite today. freedomsrisingsun.com. I'm Sam Bushman. nationally syndicated by the Loving Liberty Radio Networks, lovingliberty.net, and God Save the Republic of the United States of America.